The foal was still breathing when they arrived. Barely. Mud clung to his legs like chains, and rainwater pooled around his small, trembling body. One hind leg was twisted at an angle that made even the most seasoned ranch hands look away. His chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven bursts, each breath sounding like it might be his last. The storm hadn't stopped for hours. Lightning split the sky as two veterinarians knelt beside him, their faces grim beneath the harsh beam of a truck's headlights. They didn't need to say much. Their silence already carried the verdict. "He won't last the night," one finally said. The words landed heavy. The foal's ears flicked weakly at the sound, as if some instinct deep inside him still fought to stay present. His eyes, dark, glassy, impossibly aware, searched the faces around him. Not for help. For meaning. This wasn't how life was supposed to begin. Just hours earlier, he'd been born in the far corner of a wind-beaten pasture, his mother exhausted, the ground unforgiving. When he tried to stand, his legs betrayed him. When he fell, he didn't cry out, he just lay there, confused, soaked, and silent. By the time help arrived, it was already too late. Or so everyone believed. Even if he survives tonight, the second veterinarian added quietly, he'll never walk properly. The damage is severe. Neurological and structural. The word never echoed louder than the thunder. A man stood just beyond the circle of light, hands clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone white. His name was Caleb, and the ranch had been his father's before it became his burden. He had buried too many animals already. Lost too much. Learned the hard way that hope could be expensive. "What are you saying?" Caleb asked, though he already knew. The first veterinarian exhaled slowly. The humane choice would be to let him go. The rain fell harder. The foal twitched. Just enough. Caleb saw it. Not a reflex. Not a spasm. A decision. The foal tried to pull his legs under him, failed, and tried again anyway. His breathing quickened, pain flashing across his face, but still he struggled. Not panicked. Determined. Something inside Caleb cracked. "Give him the night," he said suddenly. The vets exchanged looks. "That won't change the outcome." "Maybe not," Caleb replied. "But it'll change mine." They hesitated. Then nodded. "He'll need to be kept warm. Dry. Constant monitoring," one said. "Don't expect miracles." Caleb didn't answer. He scooped the foal into his arms, surprised by how light he was, how fragile. The foal stiffened at first, wild instinct flaring, but exhaustion won. He went still, head resting against Caleb's chest, heartbeat fluttering like a trapped bird. It was the first time anyone had held him. Inside the barn, Caleb laid him on thick bedding and wrapped him in blankets. He sat beside him all night, listening to the storm, counting breaths, whispering words he didn't know he remembered, things his father used to say during long, losing seasons. "You just stay," he murmured. "That's all you have to do." The foal didn't sleep. Neither did Caleb. When dawn finally broke, pale and quiet, the foal was still alive. The veterinarians returned. They checked reflexes. Monitored breathing. Examined the leg again. Their expressions didn't change, but something in their eyes did. "His, stable," one admitted. "For now," the other added quickly. They stood up. "This doesn't mean survival," the first said. "And if he does survive, his quality of life." Caleb raised a hand. "I understand." What he didn't say was this: "I recognize him." Because Caleb had once been the boy everyone told wouldn't make it. The one written off after an injury ended his riding career before it began. The one who stayed anyway. The foal had no name yet. No future anyone could agree on. Only a question hanging in the air. And as the veterinarians drove away, certain they had just delayed the inevitable, none of them noticed the foal shift, slowly, painfully, and press his nose against Caleb's hand. A silent choice. A quiet refusal. The foal survived the night. That alone felt like defiance. But survival, the veterinarians reminded Caleb the next morning, was not the same as living. The foal's hind leg remained twisted, weak, unresponsive in places. His attempts to rise ended in collapse, each fall harder to watch than the last. The diagnosis came wrapped in careful language, but the meaning was unmistakable. Severe trauma at birth, one veterinarian said, adjusting her gloves. There's nerve damage. Possibly permanent. Caleb nodded, eyes fixed on the foal's small chest rising and falling. What are his chances? A pause. Too long. Low, she answered. And even if he survives, he'll never be a normal horse. Normal. Caleb had learned to hate that word. They suggested a timeline. Days. Maybe weeks. They talked about pain management, about ethics, about knowing when to stop. Caleb listened respectfully, thanked them, and then did something they didn't expect. He asked them to show him how to care for the foal anyway. That was how the days began. Caleb slept in the barn now, waking every few hours to check breathing, reposition limbs, warm milk, clean bedding. He learned to support the foal's weight with towels and slings, lifting just enough to let blood flow, to remind muscles they still existed. The foal resisted at first. Every touch startled him. Every adjustment triggered instinctive panic. His ears flattened, his breath quickened, and his body stiffened as if bracing for pain he had already decided was inevitable. Caleb slowed down. He spoke softly. Repeated the same phrases. Let the foal smell his hands before lifting. Let him struggle a little, just enough to choose, not enough to fail. Easy, Caleb whispered. I've got you. The foal didn't trust him. Not yet. But he listened. The veterinarians returned weekly. Each visit followed the same pattern: cautious examination, guarded expressions, professional distance. He's still alive, one said after the third week, unable to hide her surprise. Yes, Caleb replied. He is. They adjusted medication. Suggested physical therapy exercises more out of obligation than belief. One quietly admitted, most people wouldn't have tried this long. Caleb shrugged. Most people weren't here that night. The foal grew stronger in ways that didn't show on scans or charts. His eyes brightened. His appetite increased. He began to recognize Caleb's footsteps, lifting his head before the barn door opened. When Caleb entered, the foal no longer flinched, he watched. That watching mattered. One morning, as sunlight spilled through the slats in the barn wall, Caleb noticed something different. While supporting the foal upright, he felt a subtle shift, a tremor in the injured leg. Did you feel that? He whispered, heart racing. The foal leaned harder into him, breathing fast, trembling with effort. The leg didn't buckle. It held. Just for a second. The veterinarians dismissed it as reflex when Caleb told them. False signals happen, one said. Don't read too much into it. But Caleb did. Because reflexes didn't try again. And the foal did. Each day, he demanded a little more. He pushed longer before collapsing. He tested weight where pain lived. He failed often, but less completely. And every failure was followed by a look at Caleb that felt like a question. Are we done? Caleb always answered the same way. Not today. The first real breakthrough came unexpectedly. A loud bang echoed from outside, metal striking metal. The foal startled, lurched, and for the first time, scrambled upright without help. His legs shook violently. His injured limb barely cooperated. But he stood. 3 heartbeats. Then 4. Then he fell. Caleb was frozen, hands over his mouth, tears burning his eyes. He hadn't dared to breathe. The foal lay still for a moment, sides heaving. Then he turned his head and looked straight at Caleb. Something passed between them: fear, pride, exhaustion, wonder. The foal flicked his ears forward. Caleb laughed through tears. You did it, he said softly. You actually did it. Word began to spread. Neighbors stopped by, drawn by rumor more than belief. They stood at the barn door, watching the thin, uneven foal attempt to rise, fail, and try again. Some shook their heads. It's cruel, one muttered. Letting him struggle like that. Others were quiet. One man, older, said nothing at all, just removed his hat and stayed longer than anyone else. The veterinarians noticed the changes too, though they were careful not to say what they were thinking. His improving, one admitted during a visit. Marginally. Marginal was more than 0. Caleb named the foal Mercy that day. Not because he was fragile, but because Mercy was what everyone else had denied him. As weeks turned into months, Mercy learned to stand on his own, awkwardly, briefly, but intentionally. His gait was uneven, his balance unreliable, yet his determination never faded. He grew into his name, quiet and unyielding. Still, doubts lingered. One veterinarian pulled Caleb aside after a visit. "You need to understand," she said gently. "This doesn't mean a miracle. Long-term survival is still uncertain." Caleb looked back at the stall, where Mercy rested with his head against the wood, eyes half closed, peaceful. "I'm not waiting for a miracle," Caleb said. "I'm watching one grow." The veterinarian didn't reply. She just watched Mercy a little longer than necessary. And somewhere between professional distance and human awe, certainty began to crack. Because the foal who wasn't supposed to survive was no longer just surviving. He was choosing to stay. And the people who had agreed he wouldn't were starting to run out of explanations. The silence came before the doubt. It settled into the barn one afternoon as Mercy stood, alone, for nearly a full minute. No sling. No towels. No hands holding him upright. His legs trembled, especially the injured one, but he stayed standing, head lifted, ears forward, breathing hard but steady. Caleb didn't move. He had learned that rushing miracles was the fastest way to lose them. Mercy swayed, corrected, and swayed again. Each adjustment looked clumsy, unpolished, wrong by every standard of veterinary textbooks. And yet, it worked. When Mercy finally lowered himself back to the bedding, he did so carefully, deliberately, like a horse who understood gravity and respected it. Caleb exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That same week, the veterinarians arrived together. That alone was unusual. They examined Mercy quietly, more thoroughly than before. They tested sensation again. Range of motion. Muscle response. One of them pressed gently along the damaged leg, watching Mercy's reaction closely. Mercy flinched. Then leaned into Caleb. The older veterinarian straightened slowly. "That shouldn't be possible." The words weren't dramatic. They were unsettled. Caleb felt his chest tighten. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said carefully, "that the nerve pathways may be adapting. Or rerouting." The other vet shook his head. "That degree of recovery shouldn't happen. Not with this level of trauma." Mercy shifted his weight and stood again, unprompted, unassisted. Both veterinarians fell silent. That was the moment. Not the standing. Not the movement. The silence. Because for the first time since the stormy night of his birth, they had nothing to say. They adjusted Mercy's care plan that day. Reduced medications. Increased controlled movement. Introduced low-impact strengthening exercises they had previously dismissed as pointless. Slow, one warned. Any progress could reverse. Caleb nodded. "We've only ever gone slow." Trust grew in layers. Mercy began to accept a halter without panic. Learned the rhythm of Caleb's hands, the difference between pressure and guidance. When strangers visited, he stayed behind Caleb's shoulder, wary but calm, reading the world through him. The wildness was still there. But it no longer ruled him. Then came the setback. It always does. One morning, Caleb found Mercy lying awkwardly, breathing fast. His injured leg had swollen overnight, hot, tender, angry. Panic surged through Caleb as he called the veterinarians. They arrived quickly. "This is what we warned about," one said grimly. "Overuse. Stress." Mercy tried to stand and failed. The old fear rushed back. They discussed options in low voices. Rest. Anti-inflammatories. Possible regression. One word hovered unspoken between them all. Euthanasia. Caleb heard it anyway. That night, he sat in the stall long after the barn lights went out. Mercy lay with his head in Caleb's lap, breathing slow but shallow. The weight of the choice pressed down on him, ethics versus hope, mercy versus belief. "I won't let you suffer," Caleb whispered. "But I won't give up on you either." Mercy shifted, lifting his head slightly, dark eyes locking onto Caleb's face. There was no fear there. No confusion. Only presence. The swelling subsided over the next days. Slowly. Painfully. But it did. Mercy stood again. Uneven. Determined. The veterinarians returned, quieter than usual. He keeps forcing us to revise our expectations, one admitted. The other side. I don't like being wrong. Caleb smiled faintly. Neither did my father. As spring arrived, Mercy took his first steps outside the barn. Grass brushed his legs. Wind tugged at his menere. He startled at birds, at shadows, at freedom, but he didn't fall. Neighbors gathered again, this time without judgment. Without whispers. They watched Mercy walk. Not perfectly. But proudly. One of the veterinarians filmed it on her phone. Later, Caleb would find that video shared among colleagues, passed quietly at first, then with growing disbelief. This was the foal we said wouldn't survive. Mercy's muscles strengthened. His coordination improved. The limp never vanished, but it softened, became part of his rhythm rather than a flaw that defined him. And then, one afternoon, something happened that none of them were prepared for. Mercy ran. Not far. Not fast. But freely. Caleb laughed out loud, the sound raw and unfiltered. Mercy slowed, turned, and trotted back, head high, eyes bright, chest heaving with triumph. The veterinarians stood nearby, stunned. One finally said what none of them had dared before. He's going to live. The words echoed louder than thunder ever had. Because now the question wasn't if Mercy would survive. It was what he might become. And somewhere in the quiet that followed, every prediction made that first night collapsed under the weight of a living, breathing contradiction. The first article appeared quietly. No headline. No photos splashed across screens. Just a short feature buried in the back of a regional agricultural journal. Foal with severe birth trauma shows unexpected recovery. Caleb didn't even know it existed until one of the veterinarians mentioned it during a routine visit. I didn't use his name, she said quickly, almost apologetically. Just the case. The recovery pattern. It's unusual. Unusual was an understatement. Within weeks, the article began circulating. Shared among veterinary forums. Debated in comment sections. Screenshot and forwarded with captions like "This shouldn't be possible, and has anyone seen something like this before?" People started calling. Not reporters. Not sponsors. Colleagues. Veterinarians who wanted to see Mercy for themselves. The first arrived skeptical, arms crossed, questions sharpened by years of certainty. She walked around Mercy slowly, watching his gait, noting the way he favored his injured leg but compensated without pain. He's learned to move with the injury, she said softly. Not against it. Mercy stood calmly beside Caleb, ears flicking but relaxed. When the vet reached out, Mercy tensed, then waited. Trust had replaced fear. The second visitor was younger, eyes wide with something close to reverence. This could change how we approach cases like this, he said. We're taught to be realistic. But maybe we're also taught to quit too soon. Caleb didn't answer. He just watched Mercy lower his head and graze, alive in a way no chart could explain. With attention came pressure. Some vets suggested experimental therapies. Others warned that Mercy was being romanticized, that outliers were dangerous examples. People will cling to false hope, one said. Not every case ends like this. Caleb agreed. Mercy was not a promise. He was a question. Then came the invitation. A veterinary conference. Not to present Mercy as a miracle, but as a discussion. Ethics, expectation, and outcomes. Caleb almost declined. Mercy wasn't a case study to him. He was family. But one of the original veterinarians, the one who had first said he won't last the night, asked quietly, "Would you let them see him?" Her voice wasn't defensive. It was curious. They traveled carefully. Mercy loaded into the trailer without panic, stepping in with a confidence that still caught Caleb off guard. At the conference grounds, he stood quietly as professionals gathered, some whispering, some openly astonished. One whispered, "That's the foal?" Another asked, "How is he even standing?" The presentation was calm. Clinical. Slides of early scans. Videos of Mercy learning to stand, to walk, to run. No dramatic music. No swelling speeches. Just evidence. When Mercy was led into the room, the reaction was immediate. Silence. Then a murmur. Then stillness again. Mercy walked slowly across the floor, gait uneven but controlled. He stopped, turned, and looked out at the room full of people who had once believed survival wasn't worth attempting. No one spoke. A senior veterinarian finally broke the silence. "We would not have tried this," he admitted. "We would have advised euthanasia." The room shifted. Another voice followed. "We did advise it." The first vet, the one who had knelt in the mud that night, stood. Her hands shook slightly. "I was wrong," she said. The words hit harder than applause ever could. She continued, "Not because my diagnosis was inaccurate, but because my imagination was too small." Caleb felt his throat tighten. Mercy flicked an ear at the sound of her voice, then returned his attention to Caleb. That was all the validation he needed. After the conference, messages poured in. From students. From ranchers. From people who had stood in barns staring at animals they were told wouldn't survive. "What if I wait one more night? What if I try a little longer?" Caleb answered carefully. He never promised outcomes. He shared patience. Back home, life slowed again. Mercy didn't become famous. He didn't tour. He didn't race or jump. He lived. He helped calm other injured animals. He stood quietly with foals learning to trust. He became a presence, steady, grounding, undeniable. And still, the veterinarians returned. Not to check on him. To learn from him. One evening, as the sun dipped low, the original vet stood beside Caleb at the fence. "I still think about that night," she said. "About how certain I was." Caleb nodded. "So do I." She watched Mercy graze, peaceful. "I've stopped saying never," she admitted. Caleb smiled faintly. "He'll like that." Because Mercy had already done the impossible. And the hardest part was still ahead, not survival, but acceptance. Years passed in a way that felt almost gentle. Not dramatic. Not miraculous. Just steady. Mercy grew into a full-sized horse, not flawless, not fast, not destined for trophies or titles. His leg never straightened completely. His gait always carried a soft reminder of how close he had come to not existing at all. But he was strong. Stronger than anyone had predicted. Stronger, even, than Caleb sometimes felt himself. The ranch changed because of Mercy. People began bringing horses others had given up on. Old injuries. Behavioral scars. Animals labeled too difficult, too broken, not worth the cost. Caleb never promised miracles. He promised care. Mercy became part of that care without ever trying. He stood beside frightened horses in quarantine pens. He stayed calm when others panicked. Foals followed him instinctively, as if they sensed he had once stood exactly where they were. Visitors noticed. "That one's different," they'd say. "What happened to him?" And Caleb would tell the story, not as a victory, but as a lesson. About limits. About certainty. About the danger of confusing probability with truth. One autumn afternoon, a familiar truck pulled into the drive. The veterinarians. Older now. Slower. Quieter. They didn't bring equipment. No charts. No scans. They brought coffee. And silence. They stood at the fence together, watching Mercy move across the pasture, sunlight catching the dust beneath his hooves. His stride was uneven, but purposeful. Confident. Alive. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, one of them exhaled and said what none of them had ever said before. "We were trained to prevent suffering," he said. "But sometimes, we prevent life." No one argued. Because Mercy was the argument. Caleb thought back to that first night. The rain. The mud. The certainty in their voices. The weight of a decision that should have been simple. He realized something then. Mercy hadn't survived despite the predictions. He survived beyond them. That night, Caleb sat alone in the barn after everyone left. Mercy stood beside him, resting his head gently against Caleb's shoulder, a gesture he had learned on his own. Caleb smiled. "You proved them wrong," he whispered. Mercy breathed softly, warm and steady. And maybe, just maybe, that silence was better than applause. Because silence meant acceptance. It meant humility. It meant learning.